Welcome to the Six Hats podcast, where I, Dr. Shami, a lifestyle and nutritional medicine family doctor, will talk about how women strive to find balance each day by juggling their six roles, being a woman, mother, daughter, partner, business owner, and professional. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Six Hats podcast. And I'm really excited to dive into a very interesting topic today. It's actually women bullying women, and it's with Dr. Nathalie Martinek. Now, Nathalie is an ex-systems biology and cancer researcher turned narcissism hacker, consultant, and independent medical culture researcher. As a highly attuned observer, she became acutely alive to the fact that toxic behaviours metastasize, just like the cancer tumours she was studying so closely. So she posed questions, developed and tested theories, researched, found others around the world, and co-created a collaborative program to address issues such as saviour burnout among health professionals, executive leaders, and activists. Her book, entitled The Little Book of Assertiveness, provides practical strategies and scripts for responding to dominating, controlling behaviours without compromising your relationship or your values. Now, as a global consultant for leaders in healthcare, tech, and related industries, she now helps individuals and small groups navigate professional relationships that feature narcissistic behaviors. Welcome, Nathalie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Shami. So great to be here.
Now, Nathalie, I would love to dive right in on the whole women bullying women. And I just want to share a conversation that I actually just had yesterday with a barrister. And she was, funnily enough, in charge of a well-being group for lawyers. And so she actually literally experienced women bullying women to the point of severe depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. And what was really interesting is when she approached the whole topic of let's talk about bullying within this group, they resisted it and they actually started bullying her because they believed it didn't exist. So I'd love to start on this topic by actually addressing awareness. Does it exist and what does it look like?
Yes, only the small topics. So it definitely exists. There's evidence behind it. A few years ago, the Workplace Bullying Institute came out with some data. Out of all the bullying incidents that include women on women bullying, that's about 80%. And if you're a woman who has a woman boss or manager, you are more likely to experience bullying than not. So that is pretty high statistics. It's of women on women rather than all bullying incidents. Men bullying men is still the highest incident, but bullying looks different between men and women. And so women tend to use more subtle tactics that are leveraging the social connectedness that women can tend to be good at, like cooperativity. But women are also highly competitive, just like men. This is across the whole animal kingdom, not abnormal. So women they view as threats, they will undermine by gossiping about them, spreading rumors and starting smear campaigns, will put them down publicly. So it involves humiliation, so shaming, shunning, and social death, ultimately. So those are the tactics, which are slightly different to how men go about their bullying, which tend to be more physical intimidation.
Wow, that's so interesting you say that because that's literally what happened to her. It was public shunning, all of those kind of ways that you described. That's incredible. So before we moved into like what psychology behind it, what's actually happening, why are women actually afraid to even talk about this topic?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about it because there's a few reasons that I've seen that influence why women don't want to talk about it. So some don't even see that it exists because if they grew up in families, especially with a dominating mother, these behaviors, these aggressive behaviors between mother-daughter or mother and other females in the family can be seen as normal and quite familiar. So it creates a sort of blindness or bias where they can't actually, or blind spot, where they can't actually detect these behaviors as aggressive when they see it in their workplace. There's perceptions that the workplace is safe and everyone gets along. They're not going to look for signs of aggression or even notice it. So you'll get the denial from those women. If you're one who says, so-and-so has been picking on me, I've been targeted, these are the ways it's happened, you'll get the denial. Another one is women have fought so long and hard to have the rights that women have and the level of access to all parts of society that 100 years ago didn't exist. So Many women are afraid that speaking negatively about other women is going against the sisterhood and creating some bad press for women. Women have it hard enough. We're still not at equal status with gender equity around pay, around respect in different society in the workforces. There's still a small percentage of females in high positions of leadership compared to men. So we don't want to hurt the feminist movement. So women are more likely to tap into all the ways that other women uplift each other. And let's only focus on that unity while denying the reality that women hurt other women. And the other aspect is that the women who vehemently deny women on women bullying and are also vocal about their support for women tend to be the bullies themselves. So they talk themselves up. So one of the ways that they undermine women is they talk themselves up. They're in positions of power or higher status, and they talk badly about women who don't have the same attributes or haven't been able to achieve what they have, but they also believe in their own superiority, which prevents them from examining their own behaviors, and they're likely to keep women down if they're posing a threat to their status and position, and they're unaware that they are the bullies. So those are three different angles to look at: is what's behind this denial, what's motivating it.
Wow, it actually makes so much sense what you say, because if you're actually familiar with it, it may not be a problem in their eyes. And it's almost like it's hard to even comprehend it exists. It's almost like stepping into uncomfortable, dangerous ground. It's easier to avoid uncomfortable conversations than actually deal with it. So there's so many levels that can happen, which makes so much sense, because it's easier to shut it out, just get on with it, just get to work, do what you need to do. And these are all habits. What I'm hearing, it's a behavior, it's a habit of way people behave, where they're used to gossiping, they're used to talking down about others, it's interesting what you say about the superiority, almost that hierarchy, what power means to someone when they get a promotion. It's just so interesting. I've just been reflecting on the impact of titles, organizations, and also on human behavior. Like, why are we striving to get that promotion, which also means extra responsibility, but that also comes with power. But what does that actually do to our psychology? But in actual fact, it's just a title. And it's interesting how we naturally behave towards these titles. Oh, you're the CEO of this company. Wow. All of a sudden, you shift in the way you behave with this person, when it's actual fact, they're a human being behind that title with absolutely the same issues like everyone else. And it's so interesting, isn't it, Nathalie, how titles, all of this is societal conditioning.
Yeah. And where did it come from? Women didn't shape society. Well, they've helped sort of shaped it as they've been able to get access to different spaces within industries. But it was developed by men, and men are hierarchical. That's how they structure their relationships, through a social dominance and a hierarchy. It's not as natural for women to structure into hierarchy. We don't hear commonly alpha women, we hear alpha female. So it's more alpha male. So women have had to enter into these pre-existing societal structures and find a way to fit. And those with ambition wanting to succeed and gain power, well, they have to play the game that already exists in order to succeed and get ahead. And there's some women, it's a small percentage, who don't play the game that way, who do leverage cooperation and uplifting others and compassion with boundaries and tactical savvy and lots of other skills. But that's few compared to the majority who have emulated male characteristics of working, because the usual ways that women tend to exist as seen as friendly and warm and cooperative don't let them get ahead. That actually makes them seem less competent. So they've had to adopt and assimilate ways of being that are not threatening to the men of those positions in power, that make them seem like they're quite competent and skilled. And as they gain power, they're also suppressing certain characteristics inside them that are seen as less palatable or threatening or less competent. So by emulating these male characteristics, these preferred male characteristics, they're actually rejecting aspects of themselves. And that's going to have an effect on their psyche, their behavior. And so they end up turning into psychopaths sometimes. So that's a part of, because they don't see it happening to them. They don't see the impact of the assimilation and plus their ambition to succeed. So it can become a toxic mix.
It's almost like you're going up that ladder, the executive ladder, and you're mimicking behaviors that you see have been successful for other people. And perhaps it has been successful for male colleagues.
Yeah, and it doesn't prevent men from becoming psychopaths either. The more power that you attain without practice of examining your behaviors and trying to maintain or cultivate humility, you are naturally going to reduce in your empathy, and you're going to enhance all these narcissistic traits because they're seen as what's wanted. They're seen as what is competent and perceived as desirable. So you naturally become less empathic, which increases you on the narcissism spectrum. So it happens to men and women across every industry as they rise in power, if they don't have a safeguarding mechanism to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. And what is that positive feedback look that they're getting, in the sense of their behavior is obviously getting some kind of positive feedback to encourage that narcissistic tendency?
Yes, so depending on if we're thinking about workplace, depending on the type of workplace, usually if they're the ones bringing in customers and driving up revenue, that's already a tick for them. So the managers or leaders in charge of promotion or recruitment can ignore some of those less savory things or deny that they exist, because here's this person who's giving us exactly what we need. We don't care about the collateral damage, or we're just going to cover our ears, not hear about it.
Wow. I guess it goes back to values and workplace culture and leadership, and what drives the culture is all about leaders as well. Is there anything else that drives this kind of behavior? So you mentioned about the hierarchy that's often guided by males in that area, and that's what women are seeing and mimicking. Are there any drivers behind that kind of psychology for bullying?
Yeah. So the drivers of bullying in general are the person who is the bully is threatened by the other person. Usually, if you read a lot about bullying, there's the common or dominant narrative is that they pick on people who are weak, which is not the truth. The woman could be seen as outstanding, and she's a threat to this other woman's position of status. So out come the claws, and the bullying begins. So threat. And threat is not a rational thing. That person can remind the bully of someone they once disliked or once hurt them. There's just an attribute that they perceive as threatening or dangerous, and they want to shut them down and eliminate them from the competition. So they go about it in ways that a lot of them don't see are bullying, because maybe, again, this was conditioned or programmed or performed in their upbringing by different authority figures in their life, like their caregivers, parents, or certain people who they admire. The authorities model the way to be, and that what is acceptable. And children, we emulate it, not knowingly. That's just how we are. And then we grow up into adults who end up behaving in this way. And if we're in a culture that permits it, then why would anyone check themselves? This is just how it is. And they're the threat. They're the bad guys. They're getting in my way. It's my right. I'm justified in doing what I need to do to eliminate them for the good of the company, or for the good of the social group, or for the good of this cause.
Wow, it makes so much sense about a threat, which kind of makes me think it's a story that they're telling themselves. That person is a threat, which is they've created. And it's become so real for them that it affects their emotions, that drives their behavior, which is so interesting because it just literally comes from a story.
Imagination. And the other aspect is we talk about bullying, women on women bullying, but a bully would be powerless without her enablers. So it takes an entire community, just the statement, it takes a village to raise an adult. Well, it takes a workplace culture or a social group to raise a bully. It's no different. So they're powerless if they didn't have the support. So they're good at garnering support. So even though the story is a figment of their imagination of what they perceive the other person is doing or being that is threatening, someone has to believe them. And then that person has to back them and want to support them in their plight. And that's where we get the term flying monkeys. So the enablers tend to be flying monkeys who end up inflicting some of the damage on the victim, sometimes worse than the bully. So it's the bully by proxy, used as the puppet master, using these recruits to hurt their target. They don't operate alone. That's why it's powerful. And targets are often helpless when they realize too late that they've been targeted. It's not just one person. It's going to be a group of people, and some of whom they've trusted.
Wow. If we could just sit with that, bullies have enablers and they're not on their own. And the fact that a bully by themselves is actually powerless, that's huge. That really is huge, because I never thought about it like that at all. Never thought there would be a community surrounding the bully enabling that kind of behavior. Wow, that's incredible. And was that through research, Natalie? That's how we are
Yeah.
that. Wow.
Well, I'm been the victim of bullies, as have many people, and not horrendous bullying, but enough to put me into a horrific mental state that as an adolescent, teenager, and then a few times as adults in different ways, always by women. So it got me wondering what the hell is going on. And then I had to reflect on my own behavior. How have I been part of this? I've totally been part of. I've been an enabler. I've been a flying monkey. I've been horrendous to other women or girls. So we have to recognize these are not these outlandish features. We all have the capacity to be hurtful to others when we're carrying hurt. And we have justifications for it because it's convenient to justify behavior so that we don't see ourselves as bad. And the bad person is the person we're trying to remove or neutralize. So some of the enablers are the deniers of bullying happening. No, that person's not bad. You're just misunderstanding or you're being oversensitive. So you get the gaslighting. So they're also enablers. They don't necessarily have to be the ones who are doing the direct attacks or the indirect attacks. Their inaction are part of the whole system that is enabling this bully to be powerful.
Is there a way of identifying enablers?
The ones who deny, the ones who feed the bully, gossip. They seem to be friendly with both the target and the bully, but they are really transmitting information to the bully because the bully tends to be the one who's the most powerful within a social group. If we're thinking about a hierarchy, they're at the top of the hierarchy, which doesn't mean the manager or the leader. It's anyone within a system who has the most power to influence those around them. And those who, all of us, this part, again, part of our nature to want to associate with power because we associate that with our survival and our success. And this is known as system justification theory. So we're prepared to justify all sorts of heinous actions or deny them or ignore them, or minimize them in order to maintain our position of power. So what can help is looking at who is where in a social hierarchy, not who we are in an organizational structure, but who are we really in reality in this social hierarchy with the bully at the top. And the closer you are to the bully, the more likely you're the enabler.
I'm really intrigued about the psychology of a bully. Do they get satisfaction when they see a certain emotion in who they're bullying? Is it satisfaction? Is it joy? What's the positive feedback that they're getting?
Yeah, I think there's some sadistic tendencies in some people, and they get off on seeing people suffer, that someone is submitting to them, because that's when they feel powerful to override their own feelings of shame and powerlessness. So somebody who's now afraid of me and I can control them, I can do what I want, I'm going to feel good and powerful about myself. So that becomes like a drug. And you're going to want that hit again. And if you find that you're getting away with it, then you're likely to do it again to that person. So it just brings out this dark tetrad or triad trace. And it's in all of us who don't have the empathy to consider what it might be like for that other person, because you're in your hurt, you're in your own justification of your behavior because they hurt you. So you're right to fight back and defend yourself and protect yourself, but you're doing it in a way that is violent and harmful to someone else, but you can't see it because you haven't questioned your motives. You haven't questioned your story or your belief, and people around you are feeding you, telling you, yeah, you're right. Of course they're acting this way. Yeah. So I think people do get off. Otherwise, why would they keep doing it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I'm curious, has there been any research about the link to adverse childhood experiences that link to someone who has a tendency to be a bully?
So there's links, but whether or not you can say a child who's had adverse experience that fits between 7 and 10 on the scale, the ACE scale, they are going to become narcopaths and bullies. You can't say that, because there's so many other things that occur in someone's life during their upbringing that shape them. And hopefully there's some restorative, corrective influences in their life that help them develop their moral compass and their ability to listen to their conscience. And then there are those who don't. So children who've experienced neglect, they can emotional neglect. Their parents haven't been attuned to their needs. So they grew up not having certain emotional range or moral compass. But on the flip side, children who've been brought up in this overly indulgent family where they're given everything and they've never had to suffer consequences for wrongdoing, they're going to keep getting away with things and they're going to continue to push the envelope. Then you have ones who are more of like the child who not necessarily neglected, but they weren't necessarily favored either. And so their way of seeking attention can come out in that way. Yes, there's research, but there's nothing conclusive that says if X happens, Y will occur. They'll become the bully. Some who have been bullied in their own family come out being incredibly empathic and loving, often the victims of bullies because we repeat these cycles. But the ones who tend to be the golden children of their families, there would be and the parent is quite domineering and charismatic and strict and sparing with their approval, sparing with their love, conditional love. The golden child tends to emulate that parent, so they become the bullies.
Wow. So Natalie, I'd love to move on to tips. You've mentioned about your book and it teaches us how to respond to different situations. Are you able to share any tips with us today?
Yeah, so the book isn't really about bullying. It's more about noticing the subtle hierarchical relational situations. So I think the biggest tip is we all tend to assume that when we're in a workplace or among peers that we're equals. And both parties might believe that you're equals, but there's a good chance that there's one party who's dominant over the other because we stratify into hierarchies as our default. That's just our natural way of being. As much as people want to oppose that, someone needs to know who the authority is in the relationship. Even if we're friends, sometimes that happens. We have to work quite hard to cultivate a reciprocal and equitable relationship. It doesn't happen naturally. So that's my first tip. So having said that, it's becoming aware of, I'm having an interaction with a colleague, who's the one trying to take control over it? And the way they're going about it is, for example, if they're the ones in control, they're going to be telling me what they think, and they're going to be expecting me to do what they want in their timeline. So just recognizing that, oh, they think I'm their subordinate. They think they're the authority here. So I need to address, oh, hey, have these roles and we're colleagues. Can we negotiate how we can work together so that we're making sure that we can complement what needs to be done and we both have a say versus one person driving things because that person's going to likely become resentful that they feel like they're carrying the load when that didn't need to be the situation. So it's naming it without blaming.
No, that's actually quite powerful, just even naming it, because often we don't want to do that because we're creating all these stories in our mind of what could happen if we do name it, what's the consequences. But naming it is actually really powerful, calling it out. So Natalie, is there hope for the future? What needs to change? And I know that's a really big question, but just even starting off the conversation.
So I think I'll answer that question as a start, that we need to get better at becoming aware of ourselves and our tendencies towards needing to be in control of situations, which is quite common among high achievers, perfectionists, people pleasers. These are all ways of initiating control, just sometimes in ways that are not threatening, especially if I think about people pleasers. So what is my tendency to want to dominate? Or am I normally the passenger and I play a passive role in situations and I just give authority to someone else who wants to have it naturally? So that will create a power imbalance in the relationship right from the get-go. So I need to be alert to what are my tendencies? Do I tend to dominate or do I tend to be more passive, and the other is seen as the authority and therefore they can take over and eventually potentially do things that end up hurting me or hurting us or the project? So that's one. And how do we know a bit more about ourselves? We look at our past and our upbringing. What role did we play in our family? Who is the more dominant one in the relationship? Who was I seeking approval from all the time and still do? So that creates the blueprint for how I relate with other authority figures. And the authority doesn't have to be someone at a higher status than me in my workplace. They could be my peer. They could be someone who reports to me. So it's all about perceived authority based on who is more likely to be dominant in a relationship. So I need to know myself and I need to understand what's going on for me so that I can start to modify my behavior by being more explicit about the kinds of relationships I want to co-create with the other person. And it's being alert to, I have a tendency to be passive, which means the other person will be more dominant. And therefore, these are the types of things that end up happening. I don't want that to happen here. How can we work together to make sure we have equal contributions or equitable contributions so that we are to getting what we want out of this? Saying that.
Yeah, exactly. I have a feeling many of my listeners would be saying, how do I even start? Because I think it can be quite overwhelming just even having, first of all, awareness, obviously looking at your own values, looking at the environment, almost being now conscious about the environment. Because often I say to patients, we live quite robotic lives. It becomes so automated from what we're eating, what we're doing, how we're sleeping. When I look from the health point of view, it's almost so automated. We don't even think about what we're buying for food sometimes. And that can happen when you go into the work environment because you've done it day in, day out. We're so used to certain people's behavior, you just get used to it. When do we wake up? Like, how do we wake up and what's the next step can we take? Is it seeking therapy for yourself? Is it finding the right coach before even exploring addressing the situation at work?
Great question. I think we don't necessarily seek help for anything until there's a problem. So the problem arises and we didn't know there was a problem until there's a disruption. So I could be going about my day-to-day workplace life feeling great. Then something will happen. I'll hear something or I'll get some feedback and it will expose something to me that I didn't see before. So that's the first disruptive step, that my status quo has been challenged. The way I see this person or this workplace is starting to shift. So normally people then don't go see a therapist for that. Then you start to notice, you're paying more attention to certain things and you're going to start to notice things that you didn't notice before. And that's when it's going to start getting potentially upsetting, especially if one of the things you notice is that, oh, I'm the target of a bully. I think I'm being bullied. So that's when people hopefully start to look at getting help. And therapy doesn't necessarily help with bullying because we're dealing with a relational issue, not my own mental construct about what's going on. That's part of it, but I need to take some actions because it's only going to escalate. What we know about bullying is it doesn't just subdue as long as you're perceived as a threat. So it's noticing what are the things that I'm now perceiving as a problem. And if we're talking about bullying, am I being targeted here? And this is when I need to seek help, not assume it's going to get better. Or if I talk to someone in the workplace, or if I talk to HR, that's going to get better because a lot of people don't know how to deal with it properly. And especially if the person who's being accused of being the bully is higher up or has lots of great relationships as they tend to have, that's when you have the enablers, the HR professionals, the managers, the colleagues denying, and they're not going to be on your side. So it can be quite isolating. So you do need to get help then from, even if it's a therapist, but someone who's equipped to help someone navigate bullying and how to reduce their threat factor to extract themselves out of that situation.
You mentioned a really good point. Extract themselves from the situation, because in my experience as a GP, I've had many patients who've undergone quite a severe bullying, and as a result they've taken time off work and they've been off work for months, and maybe it is in Australia what's termed as work cover. So they go through this process of being able to receive payments but being away from it, seeking psychological support. But I always thought, what's the solution in that process?
Isn't one in that process, because if the idea is they take time out and they're going to eventually go back into that place, they're not any safer than when they left, because one, their bully or their abuser is there, and two, the context that betrayed them has done nothing to stop it or to hold that person accountable is still there. So just the idea of walking into that workplace can be activating and have a potentially a trauma response, because bullying is traumatizing. So that isn't the solution. The take time out, it's just suspending the activity of the bully. You're not feeling the impact of it day to day anymore, but it's like you've hit pause. You haven't ejected from the situation.
So true, because I was looking after a patient for about 2 years in that system. And I always thought, is this actually helping her? Or is this actually making it worse? So would you say, is it time to just remove yourself if you can't control HR, you can't control the corporation, the system is in wherever you are so corrupt, do you walk away?
If you can, yeah, you should. And even if you can't, you need to think about why you can't and finding some other way to transition into something else, because it's no different than women who are in intimate partner violent situations that are told. It's the same dynamic, except it's happening in workplace and you have plenty of people who are enabling it. So it's not going to get better. They have to leave, but they have to leave in a way that isn't going to make things worse for them, because the retaliation can continue even after you leave. So it's being quite strategic on how you leave so that you are seen as a reduced threat rather than a greater threat because you're leaving.
Amazing. Amazing, Nathalie. Thank you so much for your time today. And before we leave you, I'd love for you to share with our listeners, where can people find you? Because I know you run workshops for these kind of things. And if organizations are interested, where can they reach you?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website at drnataliemartinek.com, or you can type in hackingnarcissism.com. That's where you find me. I'm on all socials, Twitter, LinkedIn, not really Facebook, like socials. And it's not called Twitter, it's X. And on my Hacking Narcissism Substack. So I talk a lot about these things in detail, narcissism and how it relates to shame and how it relates to bullying and the enablers and the whole system, as well as opportunities to work with me. So you can find me on Substack on Hacking Narcissism.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nathalie.
Thank you so much, Shami. Great chat.
Remember that this is general advice only. Please see your healthcare professional for more information. So what's your take-home message today? Remember, it's all about progress and not perfection. And are you suffering from stress? Visit the Usawa Learning Hub on usawa.com.au for more resources on how to de-stress, re-energize, and reclaim your health. Enjoy the journey.